G'day folks and welcome back. So this afternoon I want to have a little chat to you about crane accidents. Look, there's way too many of them happening out there, and as operators we want to do as much as we can to try and prevent them from happening at all. Now look, while sometimes there are unfortunate things that do go wrong that are completely out of our control, there's two things mostly that as an operator you can do to make sure that your crane is going to remain stable throughout the day. All right. Now, the number one aspect of making sure the crane remains stable is to set it up as per the manufacturer's specifications. All right, so that doesn't mean just putting it up on outriggers. All right, that also includes making sure you've got adequate size padding. All right, so make sure you have a look at your surface. If it's soft, get some bigger pads, do whatever you need to do. Okay, look for any underground services. In Australia here we use the DBYD, so dial before you dig, and I'm sure in other countries you've got your own systems as well. Right, don't just rely on them, also just look around the site and look for any hints. Like if you see a fire hose reel over there somewhere, there's obviously got a line going to it. If you see a drain somewhere, those drains are running somewhere. So look around you and look at all the stuff on the ground or anything on walls that might give you a hint that there is some sort of underground service there. All right. Now, another big one that really does annoy me is whenever you're putting your outriggers out, pin your outriggers. It takes about 30 seconds to walk around and put the pins in. And if you Google crane accidents, the amount of cranes you're going to see laying on their side with the outriggers pushed in on one side. A lot of those are completely avoidable simply by taking that extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever it is, just to walk around and drop those pins in. So the problem is the outriggers, your beams go across that way and your jacks go down that way. All right, all the weight bearing is supposed to go down onto your jacks. Now, if you are near your limits, which especially in general crane hire, you do get near your limits quite often, right? The crane starts to get a little bit of force that way. And these beams aren't designed for any force pushing down on it, which means the minute you get near your limits, the chance of those outriggers sliding in are greatly increased. All right, so whatever you do, make sure you pin your outriggers. It takes no effort. All right, it's just sheer laziness if you don't go and pin your outriggers on your way around. All right, so that's the number one thing you can do to stop the crane going over. Set up as per manufacturer's specifications. All right, now the other main critical thing that you're going to do to make sure that you don't tip it over, quite simple, is to operate within the crane's load charts, which means don't go overloading it. All right, cranes are designed to go to 100% and they can safely go to 100%. If you start going past that, that's when you start getting into trouble. All right, now remember, if you are going to go to your maximum capacities, you've got to take that into account when you're working out your pad sizes as well, all right? Because obviously, especially if you're going to lift over a single outrigger, a lot of that weight is going to be over that outrigger. So you need to take into account the weight of your load as well as the radiuses you're working. Because obviously, the bigger your radius, then the more weight of the boom you're going to put out over there as well, all right? So remember the two critical things you can do as an operator to make sure that crane is going to remain stable is to set it up as per manufacturer's specifications and operate it within capacity of the crane. All right. Now, when we're talking about within capacity of the crane, I'm not just talking about how much you can lift. All right. Don't forget the wind charts play as much a part of that load chart as the capacities. All right. Now, keep in mind the crane wind speed limits don't take into account the load that you're actually lifting. All right. So if you're lifting a small, heavy load, that's typically going to be fine because it's not going to have a large surface area for it to catch up on, and the weight is going to stop the wind affecting it too much. However, if you're lifting a large load, if you're lifting formwork or 20-meter roof sheets or something along those lines, big surface area and very light loads, which means the capacity of the crane to push that load, which will then, of course, push your crane. All right. Don't forget the wind is on the crane boom as well. The number of times I've heard, especially if you're working with a man box, safety officers, they love saying the wind speed where the man box is isn't over the limit. However, they tend to forget that the wind actually acts on the boom, which is the more critical factor than acting on the man box. Because the 7 meters a second on a man box isn't going to give it a lot of effect, but it's the wind pushing on the boom, which is might push that man box around in those instances. All right, so don't forget your wind speed limit is just as much a part of that load chart as the capacity charts. All right, now another thing you can do is make sure you try and avoid any shock loading of the crane. All right, shock loading can have disastrous effects on the crane. Okay, even on a light load, if you get that sudden shock load, it's going to put extra stresses on the crane, on your lifting equipment and everything else. All right, now, best way to avoid shock loading is know your weights before you lift it. All right, you should always have some idea of what the weight of what you're lifting. All right, so if you're going to lift something, get that weight and bring it up. All right, another cause of shock loading is for rigging equipment. So obviously you want to make sure that all the rigging equipment you're going to be using, make sure it's all up to scratch, make sure it's been inspected and it's in date, and also make sure all your loads have been slung correctly. Right? Remember, there is always that potential of something unseen happening. So whatever you do, whenever you are lifting loads, make sure you do have that entire area barricaded off. All right? Because God forbid something does happen, we don't want anybody in that area as well. Right, so keep in mind those main points to make sure that crane remains stable. Set it up as per man specs. That means pinning your outriggers, because I will guarantee you all your manufacturers, where you do have pins on your outriggers, use them. All right. Now another thing to remember is I do often hear people say that if you've only got half outriggers on one side and full outriggers on the other, if you're lifting over the full outriggers, you can use your full outrigger chart. Now keep in mind, that doesn't work, because the moment you boom up, so if you boom it up to the higher boom angle, that's going to throw all the weight over to the other side of the crane, half outriggers, and then you're going to go over that way as well. All right, so keep in mind, if you are operating on half outriggers, make sure you're on the correct load chart for half outriggers. So you can use half outriggers as per the manufacturer specs, and make sure you're using the correct load chart. All right, so set it up right, pin your outriggers, check your ground bearing pressures. Once you're in the crane and it's all set up nice and safely, operate it within capacity of the crane, operate it within your speed limits, or the wind speed limits, and avoid any shock loading of the crane. All right, now keep all those things in mind, and everything should go all right. It just really annoys me when accidents happen due to sheer laziness of crane operators. All right, spend your time, do things right, and everything should be all right. Okay, thanks for your time, and I'll see you again in the next video.